And so, you still have an Landon Roberts, who was somewhat impactful for you. They kept him around at least for now, but he's had injuries. Andrew Van Ginkel is out there. Everybody, a lot of Dolphins fans love Andrew Van Ginkel, and I think he's good. I think he's been solid. And he's definitely shown some good flashes, especially getting into the backfield, in some of these exotic looks and blitzes that they brought him on and so on and so forth. And that's fun and that's exciting. But at the same time, he has kind of been like a Kyle Van Noy replicate, right? And so it kind of, just okay. He needs to take steps forward. Right? And so Emmanuel Ogbah still there, but is he gonna, right? I mean, he had his best season last year statistically with 9 sacks. Prior to that, he was just kind of, average. And is he gonna be able to break 10 sacks? Is he ever gonna get to double digits? Is he gonna be able to live up to that again? And additionally, he wants a contract, right? So there's a bunch of things there. I'm not as sold on this defense now. So getting through all of that, right? That's obviously they just signed Jerome Baker to an extension, which I actually really love, even though if I'm keeping it real, they did overpay a little bit for what he is. I love Jerome Baker, but he's not, he's not elite, right? Like he's a really good, he's a great player, and you definitely want him in your rotation. I loved him ever since they drafted him. Another Gase guy that was phenomenal in Gase's drafts, right? When you put them all together, but they did, if you're keeping it real, overpay a little. Anyway, but so say all of that, right, to kind of get to the secondary, right? Because if they lose Xavien Howard, right, I personally believe that even with Xavien Howard, they are going to regress from their lofty, gaudy numbers for a number of reasons. One, because I just don't think they were, as a whole, I don't think they were actually that good. I think a lot of that, as I've mentioned, was because they ended up playing, especially in the middle towards the late of the year, they ended up playing a bunch of teams that were either just not good and or also super beat up by injuries and COVID. They were lucky in that way that was their circumstance and their situation that they got to play in. And yes, that is part of the reason why they overachieved in 2020, right? And so I just don't think they were that good. They're not likely to have that play out, right? They started the year with a top 5 hardest strength of schedule. Their strength of schedule at the end of the year ended up being a top 5 lowest or easiest strength of schedule, right? So it started as one of the hardest, ended as one of the worst, right? That's why strength of schedules, especially at the beginning of the year, I only really care about the schedule in the middle of the year, frankly, because I mean it's fun to kind of project a little bit or whatever, like prior to, I mean I did it, right? I made up my list of games and I gave my predictions, but it doesn't really mean anything because you don't know how the season's gonna play out. You don't know who's gonna get key injuries. You don't know what's gonna happen in the middle of the season, and last year was so unpredictable, and I've said this for a while, you can't actually judge any team from last year based off of their performance or the things that they did, because it was one of the craziest football seasons we had, impacted by things that aren't normally there and in such monumental ways that you're not working with the same product. You're not working with the same product that you were expected to be working with this year, right? Because so many guys were out, etc. Opt-outs as well, right? So they're not that good. They got helped by the luck of their circumstance, and they remained one of the healthier teams. And, when you look at guys like Byron Jones, I don't think he actually really even had that great of a year. When you look at it, Xavien Howard was a third of your defense. Let's look at his stats real quick from last year. So he did play all 16 games. He had 10 interceptions. 10, as we know, led the league in interceptions. 20 passes defensed and 1 forced fumble. So he had 11 of the team's turnovers. The Dolphins were up there in turnovers last year, right, as one of the better teams. He had about a third of the overall team's turnovers because they had right around 30 something, right, in total, like a little over 30, right? And he had a third of that. Now, here's another thing. As much as I love Xavien Howard, you can't expect, I mean, that's the first 10 interception season in 12 years. Now, 2 years ago in 2018, he had 7 interceptions in 12 games. So with another 4 games, it's reasonable he could have possibly gotten to 10 interceptions. Xavien Howard is that good. Obviously, if he stays healthy, I feel pretty confident in his health until it's not, right? Until something happens, he seems to be in good health, right? When he's on the field, we know he's going to perform at an extremely high level. So he was a third of your fucking defense last year. If they lose him, let's start getting into this article now. If they lose him, it will completely change the outlook of that secondary, which this defense, the way it's designed, is heavily reliant on. And we're going to get into it, but Byron Jones, right, everybody says that he's this really great lockdown corner, but at the end of the day, look, I never thought they should have signed him to that massive 5-year, whatever, giant contract, because I didn't think he was worth it from the beginning. He's a lockdown corner, yes, and that's super important, especially for this scheme for our defense. But as it turns out, and especially when you go back and look at his time in Dallas, it would seem that there is some evidence that would suggest, and we're going to get to it in this article, that he was only really a lockdown corner when he was able to rely on, safety help and so on and so forth. In other words, he is not himself able to be on an island. He is heavily reliant on, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that you have to have good players across the rest of your defense, right? Not necessarily just the corner opposite him, but in other words, he's reliant on other players to play at that high level. But even at his highest level, he still doesn't have the fucking ball skills. So I never thought he was worth it to begin with. But as it's turning out, he might not even really be all that great of a lockdown corner when he doesn't have that help, and when he's asked to do more man coverage, right? A lockdown corner is generally defined in their ability to go man to man against whoever they're playing against, a receiver from the opposite team, and lock him down, and prevent high passer ratings in his coverage, few interceptions, hopefully no touchdowns, right? And create turnovers like Xavien Howard does. Byron Jones is not that guy. He's not that guy. Anyway, real quick, Byron Jones's stats from last year, he had, which was actually a career high in interceptions. He did have 2. Where is it? Here we go. 2, which tied the same amount that he had for his entire career before that. So now he has 4 in his career. Good for you. But he only had 2. He had, 4 passes defensed. So he had 8 less interceptions, 16 less passes defensed. To be fair, he did have a forced fumble, so they were tied there. And I forgot to look at what, I can go back to it. Combined tackles, Byron Jones had 37, 28 solo, and 9 assisted. Xavien Howard had 51 tackles, so quite a few more, 40 solo, 11 assisted, and he also had a tackle for loss. Byron Jones did not. Anyway, point is, he's clearly the way better corner. So that's part of it. But those stats, though, I just want you to keep in mind as we go through this. So let's actually start getting through this article. From George Forder on Fansided, and he's asking the question about, can the Miami Dolphins secondary succeed without Xavien Howard? The speculation surrounding Xavien Howard's holdout tends to revolve around the return Miami could expect in a trade, or how much money he desires. The more pressing question should be whether the secondary can survive without Xavien Howard. So just real quick, all the stuff I said, in the first 8 or 9 minutes of this video is prefacing, this and kind of building up the context around this situation, right? All right, Chris Greer has invested heavily into the cornerback position since Brian Flores took over in 2019. Over 15% of their salary cap is tied up in their top 2 corners. So Byron Jones and Xavien Howard have 15% of the overall cap. And we know that the cornerback position with, you add in Noah, the first round pick, and, Jason McCourty and Needham and Coleman and all these other guys, they are super expensive in the cornerback room, with those top 2 guys taking up 15% of the salary cap on their own. Let's see. That investment is because Flores' defensive scheme relies heavily on effective corners that can survive on an island in man coverage, right? So that's a fact. That is one of the staples of a Brian Flores defense, which it's not really a Brian Flores defense. It's a Bill Belichick and a Patriots defense, if we're keeping it real. I know so many Dolphins fans get like super upset and in their feelings when I say that, but the dude is trying to replicate what Bill Belichick and the Patriots have done in almost absolutely every facet of the way he operates. Even to the reports recently from, Reason, that Reason put out on his show, Finside the NFL, about, well, there was a lot in there, but one of the things that came from it is Brian Flores being a real high ego guy and wanting to be controlling and control everything. I'm telling you, that's not going to work out well with Stephen Ross, who's also a super controlling guy. Anyway, so moving on. Let's see. Who can survive on an island in man coverage without competent play from your corners? Things can fall apart quickly. So again, it's a Bill Belichick and Patriots defense, 100%. It's not Brian Flores' defense. Does he change some things up and add his own touch to it? Sure, but you can add your own flavor to somebody else's dish. It's still their dish. You just fucking added to it or changed it a little bit. Like if you take your mother or your grandmother's recipe and you just add a little something to it, sure, you're adding your own spice, your own flavor, whatever, you're mixing it up. Maybe you're vegan and you don't, you completely replace the meat parts or the animal products like I would as a vegan, right? You're still using, right? Like when I make my mother's macaroni and cheese, it's still her recipe. I just put my own fucking spin on it, right? Like it's still there. So it's still a fucking Bill Belichick and a Patriots defense. Point blank, bottom line, period. Anyone who says otherwise is just trying to create a world that doesn't exist because they're trying to make Brian Flores be somebody he's not. Who he's not even really pretending to be, frankly. Anyway, aside from missing out on the past breakups and turnovers that X generates, how else would losing Howard negatively impact the defense? The domino effect. We see this kind of thing with offensive lines all the time. One player gets hurt, then another starter is moved to fill in for him, and a backup has to be brought in to fill the latter vacancy. Next thing you know, you have multiple players out of position and units tend to struggle. See, and that's another thing too, is I don't think this offensive line is, I know it's kind of a side note, but I don't even think they're going to stay healthy, right? And, injuries happen every year, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not convinced that they have adequate depth. And I think that I don't think they're going to take the steps forward that everybody thinks to begin with. I mean, you're probably going to have a rookie on the line who's going to make rookie mistakes, who coincidentally or whatever, incidentally, is going to be your right tackle, who's going to be the blind side for your quarterback. I don't understand how people are even if you really like the kid, and even if you think, like Reason says, I asked him this question of how he likes Liam Eichenberg, and he says that he feels like he's one of the most technically sound players on that line, and that's great, and I hope that's the case. But he's a rookie, bro. Like, right? So, and I'm not like, I think what Reason said is great, and I believe it, right? So, like, I'm not really yelling at him in this response, but it's more just like, I get that, but how well do you expect a rookie? Now, to be fair, and in Reason's case, I think he does get that, right? Like he does get that, there could be some struggles. My concern is that it's his blind side, which could be super problematic for Tua, especially because the fact is that he is slightly undersized to begin with and is injury prone, particularly to his lower legs. And that's a problem. If he doesn't see a fucking, pass rusher come in, which I expect them to face much fiercer pass rushes this year because they're not going to be going up against teams like the 49ers who don't have any of their premier pass rushers because they're all injured. Look, bro, I think it could be a recipe for disaster, but I don't think the offensive line is going to take those steps forward. And if and when they do sustain injuries, which a bunch of those guys did even sustain injuries, Austin Jackson, Solomon Kinley, and Robert Hunt, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all suffered some kind of injury last year, right? So if they have injuries on top of not taking those giant steps forward, it could be a super long year for this offense and for this team. Anyway, I know that was kind of a side note. Let's get back into this. Next thing you know, I already read that, and the unit is struggling. A similar thing happens when you lose your alpha corner. Now, the new alpha, he says, Byron Jones. The first domino to fall is having a player step into Howard's shoes. In this scenario, it has to be Byron Jones. He's the most accomplished Miami corner still in his prime, not named Howard, and also the highest paid player on the team. So for those reasons, absolutely. The problem is that obviously, while the necessity will be that he has to step into that role and in those shoes, he's obviously not anywhere close to the same caliber player as Howard. So you are going to be downgrading clearly, and it could be even more troublesome. He could get exposed even further as a player if he doesn't have that elite player on the opposite side of him. And also if one of his safeties who he relies on heavily as the data shows in his previous years is a rookie, right, and is making mistakes of his own, and so on and so forth, right? So there are potential problems. And look, this is why I'm called a hater, because I look at all of these little nuanced things within the big picture, I piece it all together, and I'm like, look, dude, there are serious concerns here, and when you add all of this up, I think it's going to be a long year for this team, man, and I don't think that they're going to meet the expectations that people have for them. And if they don't meet those expectations, I feel confidently that Stephen Ross will fire both Flores and Greer. All right, let's get back. If the possibility had been presented this time last season, very few people would have been concerned. I would have been one of the ones concerned. Since moving to outside corner in 2018, Jones has made a reputation as one of the best cover corners in football. He earned a Pro Bowl and All-Pro nod in 2018 and never allowed more than a 53.1% completion percentage into his coverage from 2018 to 2019, so just those 2 years. Jones had undoubtedly earned his payday. I want to pause there for a quick second. As he's going to show with some more statistics and how things played out and the kinds of coverages he was asked to play and whether or not he was asked to play man, that changes a bit. But to the payday thing. So maybe he earned a payday. Maybe you could say that, but he didn't earn the kind of payday that would dictate you should reset the cornerback market. Especially when you're bringing him to a team with that has a cornerback like Xavien Howard, who is clearly a much, much higher caliber player, right? So in other words, the Dolphins never should have fucking broke the bank and signed him to such a massive lucrative contract, because he's not worth it as a player. Even with the kind of things that he showed you in 2018 and 2019 with Dallas, when he was really heavily reliant on his safety help, etc., and wasn't asked to play as much man coverage. Look, bro, I mean, I never thought he was really all that great to begin with. And it's, so his payday shouldn't have been that big. Point blank, bottom line, period. That's what I'm getting at with that little bit. What we saw in 2020 didn't quite match up to those lofty expectations he had earned. Jones wasn't bad, but he wasn't really all that great either. He didn't say that. That's me adding in. But he unquestionably had his worst year at corner. This is the writer now. Jones allowed a 60.3% completion percentage, 775 yards, 10.6 yards per target, 5 touchdowns, and a 108 quarterback rating when being targeted in 2020. And this actually was, even though he had Xavien Howard over there, and Bobby McCain is a smart intellectual player who can quarterback the defense. Whether or not he's great at playing safety, he can certainly do that and do that at a high level. And then, of course, you know, some of the other good players like, you know, Jerome Baker on that defense, they were in a situation where they got to play a lot of weak teams for one reason or another, right? So in that situation and with all of those benefits, he still let up pretty bad numbers, right? And then you throw in the stats that I read you on top of that, right? He only had 37 combined tackles, 2 interceptions, 4 passes defensed. I mean, he's not, and unquestionably, and as this dude said, he unquestionably had his worst year at corner. So for people who are like, you know, Byron Jones had a pretty good year, and he's a big part of the reason why Xavien Howard got those 10. No, he's not. No, he's not. If he had a really locked down season and didn't let up these kind of numbers, and if his personal stats and interceptions and, you know, passes defensed particularly, because, right, maybe not the interceptions, but a lockdown corner is expected to get past breakups. Maybe he doesn't have the ball skills or whatever, but he's expected to get past breakups. He got 4 on the entire season. He did not have a good year. So to characterize Byron Jones, one, as having a good year is factually not correct. I mean, you can put the tape on and he had significant issues. Now, I guess you could be fair, and he was injured for a portion of the year, did miss some games, etc., etc., but he wasn't very good last year. And then secondly, to say that he was a reason why that fucking... No, he wasn't. He didn't have a good year himself. How are you then going to say that it was because of him that... No, Xavien Howard did the work on those interceptions himself, bro. Let me tell you that, all right? It wasn't Byron Jones, like, you know, astrally projecting himself into Xavien Howard to make those fucking acrobatic, crazy catches. Some of them being one-handed. You know why I know it's not Byron Jones astrally projecting himself into Xavien Howard? One, because you can't do that. And two, because the dude doesn't have ball skills himself. So why would I think that he's gonna somehow fucking... No, he would make Xavien Howard drop the balls. If anything... That would be terrible. If Byron Jones was able to astrally project himself into Xavien Howard, that would make Xavien Howard stop catching all those interceptions. So to say that it was Byron Jones, no matter how you slice it, is factually incorrect. Byron Jones didn't do shit in getting Xavien Howard those 10 interceptions. Xavien Howard is a fucking beast and got those interceptions himself. Okay? So let's clear that up. Anyway. Those were far and away the worst of his career in those numbers, as he mentioned. Some of that had to do with bad luck. I don't know about that, right? Like I said, because when you look at the grand scheme of things, they actually had a lot of good luck. Primarily being that they were one of the healthier teams in the league and got to beat up on weak and or, you know, injured / COVID teams from the middle to the back end of the year. That's why they had such a fucking... That's in large part why they had such a good record going to the back half of the year. You know, and Dolphins fans look at me and say, "Well, that's blasphemy. They're that good and they deserved it." And blah. No, they did. I'm sorry. They were not a 10-win team last year. They didn't deserve to go to the playoffs. And fans are going to be all up in their feelings when they're not that this year. And they massively regress on not just on the defense, but as a team as a whole, and don't make it to the playoffs, don't reach that 10+ win season, etc., etc. And look, man, it's not because I want any of this to happen. It's just that I'm able to see it coming because I am able to look at the facts, the full picture. I don't cherry pick pieces of data just to fit my narrative. I look at the entire picture and I am able to evaluate it in a very truly unbiased manner and look at it just for how the facts are. I don't want this to happen. Bro, let me be honest and let me tell you straight up. If I let my feelings get into it, and I would be more, because I am a generally an eternally optimistic person in general, right? I know that may seem hard to believe, and I can understand that actually with the way I come off, but I am. And I have hope for the team and the world and blah, 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 blah. But I'm also realistic about it. I don't have unrealistic expectations based off of the data that completely suggests something else. So anyway, Dolphins fans are gonna, fucking shit the bed this year or shit their brains, or whatever. Their minds are gonna blow when the Dolphins shit the bed. There we go. This year. And look, man, I hope that they prove me wrong. I've said this from, day one, but I mean, anyway, let's continue on. Let's see. But one of the main culprits could be Miami's system under Rod Marinelli. So this is really interesting information here. So some of that had to do with bad luck. Whatever. I guess maybe the bad luck you could say is him getting injured. But one of the main culprits could be Miami's system, he says. Under Rod Marinelli in 2018 and Dan Quinn in 2019, Jones played traditional man coverages at a lower rate. This New England South defense is easily the most man-heavy scheme he's been asked to play in. So he says New England South defense because obviously it's a replica of the New England Patriots defense. Anyway, Miami also blitzed at a much higher rate in 2020 than Dallas did in 2018 or 2019. This means a lot more press man coverage and a lot less safety help. So, let's see. He puts up some numbers. Byron Jones' percentage of coverage snaps in cover 0, cover 1, or cover 2 man. In 2018, it was 35% under Rod Marinelli. In 2019, it was 28%, so it dipped under Dan Quinn. And then it was 43% in 2020 with the Dolphins and Flores and whatever. So, don't underestimate Byron Jones, though. He has the athleticism and experience to turn things around in 2021, but if he's going to fill Xavien Howard's shoes, he will need to have a major bounce back season. Again, personally, I don't think he's really even all that great, and now as he's getting older, I mean, because in this regard, the same thing applies to Xavien Howard. As he gets older, and he was injured for part of last year, so who knows how those are going to affect him, going forward. But, I just don't really think he's all that great, if I'm being honest. And I was definitely hard against them signing him, even though I couldn't have foreseen how this was going to drastically affect, this current situation we have with Xavien Howard. I didn't see that turning into a situation where Xavien Howard was then going to want, but then again, I also wasn't able to predict that he was going to have a 10 interception, 20 pass breakup season where he was third in defensive player of the year voting, right? So, but like, I don't know, this whole shit is crazy. So let's continue. Who replaces Byron Jones? This will be the most difficult question to answer for Miami's coaching staff. There are a number of candidates to fill this second cornerback spot, but each option is either young and unproven or past their prime. It doesn't mean someone can't step up, but it remains a big question mark at this point. Plan A. Noah Igbinoghene. This is the scenario that would most please the Miami Dolphins and their fans. If Igbinoghene has taken enough of a step forward that he can be placed into a starting role and flourish, it will fully validate Chris Grier using a first-round selection on him in 2019. There are also many reasons to be optimistic about his development. Igbinoghene had a ton of success playing corner at Auburn, and his best games came against top competition. The fact that Igbinoghene only started playing corner in 2018 means there is still likely a ton of room to grow into the position. Okay, and I get that, right? I understand that this kid has a lot of upside, but first of all, he was a project player to begin with, and he had very limited experience playing the position to begin with. You don't take a guy like that in the first round. It's too big of a risk just in general. Okay, and that's one of my issues with this Dolphins regime is that, like, almost every move they make is risky in some sort of fashion. Either they take injury-prone players, they take players that are reaches, you know, for the position that they take them. They take, you know, the scraps of other players, former first-round busts, and try and rehabilitate them, right? Like, almost everything they do is risky. There is so much high potential and high reward, but it's almost none of it is panned out. Like, these players keep churning, right? They keep coming in and leaving. They haven't really developed guys, right? These reaches, a lot of these players, I consider Christian Wilkins actually to be one of them. That wasn't the play for me. That's not who I would have took. I thought they kind of reached on him there a couple years ago. But, you know, Austin Jackson, Liam Eichenberg, a bunch of these guys, right? Fucking, they're not there yet, right? And they have a long way to go. So I get it, bro. But is he going to be ready for that? And here's the thing, right? So, and he puts in a tweet of his own where he's, you know, putting Noah Igbinoghene versus Jamar Chase from 2019, and the stats that he had: 4 targets, 2 catches, 20 yards, and 1 pass breakup. That was him going against Jamar Chase in 2019. But that's college, bro. I know he's going up against Jamar Chase, and that's great. But it's still a different beast overall in the NFL, okay? Because that's just one player, right? When you look at the rest of those, the LSU and the Auburn teams, right? Like, they're not full teams of NFL caliber players, right? The environment is different. You have to now be a pro because this is your job, right? The expectations and stuff that come with being a professional player, right? Going to a major, there are so many NFL playbooks, right? There are so many different things that go into it that completely change. It's a completely different field, right? I know, like, people will use, you know, the analogies of, like, it's a same, you know, same ballpark, or, you know, different sport, right? Like, it's obviously the same sport. It's still football, but it's a completely different animal, a completely different beast. Anyway, so we have to wait and see. Now, I mean, they've been hyping him up so far in the offseason, at least in, you know, mini camp or whatever. I mean, we'll see. The hope is that he can, and right, you know, he started this off with, this is the bet, and it is, right? This is the option that would please the Dolphins and their fan base the most. Right, the fan base would love it, you know, because a lot of the fans are certainly, you know, on board with Noah. I'm not sold on the kid. I thought he was a reach. I didn't think they should have taken him there, and I would have done things differently. And I'm not convinced that he is going to pan out. And I think it's going to be even that much harder if they do lose Xavien Howard. So, but you hope that is the case, and certainly since they did spend a first-round pick on him, that definitely would be investment-wise the best thing that could play out. He doesn't have the ball skills or instincts of Xavien Howard, but his athleticism and movement skills are really some of the best on the team. Okay, but here's the thing, right? And he was projected from almost everybody that I saw coming out of Auburn, you know, before the Dolphins took him, almost every projection I saw for him was Byron Jones. So if this dude is supposed to be Byron Jones in the NFL, if he can reach his potential, he's supposed to be Byron Jones. So if he's that, well, now you have 2 corners that are maybe potentially lockdown corners, but have no ball skills. And these guys are supposed to replace Xavien Howard. I mean, it's just, I don't like, I'm sorry, I don't like anything about that. You know, and Dolphins fans, anybody who watches my channel, like, you know, they're like, you're just a hater, blah. I'm sorry, bro. Like, I'm not gonna fucking, just because they tell me to trust the process and believe in these guys because they believe in them. No, I don't have to do that. I am an independent person with a fucking mind of my own, and I can evaluate the situation on my own. I don't need to, with the data that, you know, comes from the media and from them and from what I see on tape. That's why, but that's why it, you know, for me, the next thing that I care about is the preseason games. Not so much, there's going to be valuable information, yes, that comes out of training camp and those joint practices, yes. But I want to be able to put my eyes, because then when I can put my eyes on the product, then I can determine for myself whether everything they've been saying is true or not, right? Because if they put Noah out there, if they end up trading Xavien Howard, put Noah out there and he gets roasted, well, then I'll be like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, there's nothing you're going to tell me about, the hype. He got roasted and he's not playing well. If he comes out and balls out, then that's a different story, right? And then you could validate the hype. But until that happens, all the information I have to this point, I'm not really hyped myself about it. Let's see. The more time he spends playing the position and learning from experienced corners, the more comfortable he will be in the NFL. But again, though, if Xavien Howard's not there, then that's one less corner that he has to learn from, especially if he gets traded and goes to another team, right? So, whatever. Unfortunately, we do need to take off the rose-colored glasses and be realistic about what we've seen from Igbinoghene. His time in the NFL has been tumultuous, to say the least. He clearly wasn't ready to step onto an NFL football field against a player like Stephon Diggs, but you can't survive in the NFL giving up 21 yards per completion. So that's the thing, right? He has to take massive steps forward. So many of these players, right? The Dolphins' success and the success of this regime is heavily reliant on so many young, unproven, and in some cases injury-prone players to take giant steps forward. That's way too much to bet on. Way too much to bet on. That's my opinion, and I have a feeling my opinion will be fact at the end of this year. So we'll see. I hope I'm proven wrong, but we will see. Plan B, Nick Needham. Needham was shifted to slot corner last year, but his best position will ultimately be outside corner. Needham had his best moments while playing the outside in 2019, and his lackluster athleticism is best hidden there. Because there is no sideline to contend with, receivers tend to get free releases from the slot. For a player with below average speed and explosiveness, it can be difficult to keep up with speedier receivers. Now, for me, again, Nick Needham is just kind of an alright player. He's pretty good, and he's definitely shown some flashes. He's had some good moments. But he's also been just, his entire time so far has just been kind of average, and it's been very up and down. And he tends to get a lot of penalties as well. So, there definitely needs to be a lot more seen from him as well. Again, that goes up and down this Dolphins roster. There are so many players that you got to be like, dude, there's so much more that we got to see out of you. And I don't like that. I don't think it's a recipe for success. Everybody looks at it and it's like, oh, they only look at the potential, right? So many Dolphins fans with their, aqua and orange colored glasses just look at the potential. And I've acknowledged it. I've said a million times or a bunch of times, this team has a ton of boom, but there's also a ton of bust. And, I just think that the situation, the mixture is way too volatile, and I feel confident that it's going to blow up in their faces and Dolphins fans' faces. So we'll see. All right, let's see. Just a small amount of contact can slow down a faster receiver while throwing him off his route. Let's see. Hold on, I'm sorry. At outside corner, Needham can get physical with receivers and press coverage using the sideline to his advantage. Just a small amount of contact can slow down a faster receiver while throwing him off his route, allowing Needham to stay in his hip pocket. This isn't to say that Needham can't improve in the slot. We've just seen better play from him at the boundary, which has still just been kind of, all right. If they need to turn, especially because he tends to get has historically gotten, too many penalties. If they need to turn to Needham, it would mean that Igbinoghene wasn't ready to step up, which is not ideal. But if Needham were to emerge as a league average or better boundary corner, that wouldn't be the worst thing either. But again, so many bets to fucking hedge here. At just 24 years of age, Needham could fit into long-term plans, and the Dolphins still have 2 years of team control. He's a restricted free agent in 2022. Plan C, Jason McCourty. Now, real quick before I get into this, bro, I was telling you that back when they signed Jason McCourty, that the signing worried me, not just because I don't think Jason McCourty is going to be all that great at this point in his career. And it's just another example of how he's trying to be, you know, Bill Belichick and the Patriots by bringing over yet another Patriots player. But also because I said at the time that this could spell bad news for Xavien Howard being on the team. Now, I said it in the context of they didn't have, you know, any cap space. And the conversation I was really, you know, focused on at the time was, man, look, at some point they're going to have to clear some fucking cap space. Which they still really haven't done, which blows my mind a little bit. But, you know, and so I was looking at it like, you know, Xavien Howard can end up being traded to save cap money or whatever, and he could be one of the possible replacements, so on and so forth. But now then you add in these contract disputes and the way things are turning out, the holdout, now it even amplifies that even more and is really quite concerning. Let's see, this impending holdout has to be partly why the Dolphins brought McCourty in, which is an absolute fucking disaster. There's been a lot of talk of him competing at safety, but McCourty is actually their most experienced boundary corner. From 09 to 17, he played almost exclusively as an outside corner and had a lot of success there. In his prime, McCourty was a freaky athlete and one of the better corners in the NFL. The only problem is that he'll be 34 years old this upcoming season, and there's a strong possibility that he isn't the same guy anymore. His familiarity with the system and position could be enough to get him through the season, though. This would have to be the worst case scenario for the Dolphins coaching staff. If they have to go with McCourty, that means none of their younger players stepped up to fill the massive void left by Xavien Howard's departure. There are definitely worse contingency plans than McCourty, but it would go against their current youth movement and might not even yield, you know, very much success if he doesn't play very well, right? Or if he, you know, if he's losing a step and starts getting burned and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, conclusion, Xavien Howard had one of the most productive seasons for any corner in recent memory. If he does end up departing or even just sitting out, they won't realistically be able to replace that production. Even if Byron Jones and Noah Igbenogany both take steps forward to solidify the position, the defense will be worse off without X. That's why the real plan A has to be Xavien Howard returning. It would be great to see a young corner step up on the boundary, i.e. Noah or Nick Needham, or maybe even Trill Williams, he says, but there shouldn't be any rush to push those guys into action when you have one of the best corner tandems in the NFL, both in their prime. And again, people say that, but I think it's really just Xavien Howard. I'm not... I know, again, people will call me a hater, but I just don't look at Byron Jones, and I'm really not that impressed. I'm not. Especially for the kind of money that they paid him, like, and for the problems that it's causing this team. Like, it's just, I don't like it, and I never liked it, so I'm consistent with that. I didn't like the signing to begin with, and I like it even less now, honestly, because of the even further harm that it's causing the overall team. Here's hoping that bridge can be mended. If not, 2021 could get interesting on the back end of Miami's defense. All right, so that's what I got. You know, turned out to be quite a long video. As you guys know, I'm a very loquacious person. I have a lot to say, and at times, you know, I gotta regain my thoughts for a moment or whatever, and so it is what it is. But anyway, so that's, you know, that's my take on what the Dolphins secondary would look like. I'm not, you know, I'm not convinced, right? If we're talking about it being Byron Jones, Noah Igbenogany, you know, Javon Holland, Brandon Jones, Nick Needham, right? Fucking, like, I'm sorry, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. It just, I have so many concerns with that lineup, and I mean, like I said, even with Xavien Howard, I think they're gonna end up, you know, because you can't expect 10 interceptions every year, and you know, even if he does have another 6, 7, 8, you know, interceptions, I mean, I just don't have confidence in the overall unit and so on and so forth. So that's my evaluation of things. You know, people are going to fucking continue to hate on me and shit on me because those are my views. But hey, look, it is what it is, and we will find out. And just to say, for the millionth time, I hope I'm wrong. I want them to prove me wrong. You know, and I hope the season plays out completely different. You know, I don't want them to be bad. I want my team to be great. And, you know, I'm never gonna root for them to lose, right? That's why I was against the tanking philosophy. I can never adopt a philosophy of, you know, I want my team to lose. But look, I'm gonna tell people at the end of this, if I get proven right, I'm gonna be, look, I'm gonna tell you guys, I told you so, because I previewed it. I want more than anything to be able to be like, I was so wrong, and they, you know, all of these players did take massive steps forward. The defense didn't regress, even though they lost Howard, etc., right? Or they didn't lose Howard, and, you know, he remained on the team, blah, blah, blah. I want to be able to say all those things, but I'm not going to say them until they become true. And so I want them to, but I don't see that being the outcome. I see this season, I just don't see it going very well at all. And again, when the lofty expectations are not met, I fully expect that Stephen Ross is going to make massive changes. And I think this time around, it's going to be the firing of both Greer and Flores. All right, with that, I'm gonna get out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. Of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.